If you're preparing for the BCBA exam and you see response differentiation and stimulus discrimination and feel that little moment of panic, wait, which one is this? You're definitely not alone. These two sound similar. They both involve differential reinforcement, and they both show up in conceptual and scenario questions. In this video, we're going to slow them down, pull them apart, and build a simple rule in your mind so that, on the exam, you can look at a short scenario and quickly say, this is about the response, or this is about the stimulus. And if you want to go beyond this one topic and practice with full BCBA mock exams, step-by-step explanations, and more breakdowns like this, you'll find everything at bcbamockexam.com. Study smarter, not harder. Let's start with why this pair is worth a dedicated study session. On the BCBA exam, response differentiation and stimulus discrimination show up in both pure definition questions and in those little scenario vignettes where just one or two words decide the right answer. They are often confused with differential reinforcement itself and with stimulus control and generalization, which makes them perfect trap concepts for test writers. Your exam goal after this lesson is simple. When you see a question, you ask, what is changing here? Is it what the learner does, or when and where they do it? That one question will guide almost every item that uses this pair. Let's zoom out and look at the big picture. Both response differentiation and stimulus discrimination are built on the same engine, differential reinforcement. Some things get reinforced, others don't. The central exam question is, what is changing? If the response form, intensity, speed, or timing is changing, what the learner does, that's response differentiation. If the situation, person, or SD is changing, when or where the learner responds, that's stimulus discrimination. So as you read, highlight in your head, is the story really about different versions of the response, or about different situations that signal reinforcement? That big picture filter will make this topic a lot less scary. Response differentiation happens when we reinforce some responses and not others, so that the behavior becomes more precise or specific over time. We keep the same basic behavior class, like speaking, writing, or pressing a key, but we start getting picky about which versions of that behavior earn reinforcement. Maybe only normal volume speech gets praise, only a functional pencil grip earns a sticker, or only answers within 3 seconds earn a token. Over time, the messy versions drop out and the specific, desired topography, intensity, or latency shows up more and more often. That sharpening of the response is what the exam calls response differentiation. Let's make response differentiation concrete with a few everyday examples. Imagine teaching speaking volume. Whispering and shouting both get no reaction, but normal volume gets smiles and attention. Over time, the learner talks more and more at that just right volume. Or pencil grip. The child gets a sticker only when using a functional grip. All the awkward grips are quietly ignored, and the skill sharpens. Or latency. Tokens are given only when the learner answers within 3 seconds of the SD, so responses become faster. In each example, the overall behavior is the same. Speaking, holding a pencil, answering questions. But only certain qualities of that behavior are reinforced, and those qualities become more common. So how does response differentiation show up in exam questions? Look first for a stable SD, the same instruction or cue throughout the scenario. Next, notice whether different versions of the response are being treated differently. Louder versus quieter, faster versus slower, more precise versus less precise. The reinforcement pattern will usually sound like, only responses that meet criteria X are reinforced, or closer approximations are reinforced, others are not. Common exam phrases include only exactly correct responses are reinforced, or gradually reinforced closer approximations of the target response. Quick rule: if the SD stays the same but the quality of the response is being narrowed, you're almost certainly looking at response differentiation. Now let's define stimulus discrimination. Here, the behavior is basically the same, but the learner learns to do it in some situations and not in others. In technical terms, the response occurs in the presence of one stimulus, the SD, and not in the presence of other stimuli, the S deltas. Reinforcement depends on which stimulus is present. When the right cue is there, responding is reinforced. When it's not, responding is not reinforced. On the exam, When you see the same behavior happening for one person, setting, or cue, but not for another, that's your signal that the concept is stimulus discrimination. Here are some everyday examples of stimulus discrimination. With a traffic light, the behavior go is the same, but the stimuli differ, green versus red. We want the learner to go on green, not on red. With teacher versus peer, the behavior, raising a hand to ask a question, might only happen in front of the teacher, not during casual chat with peers. With word recognition, the response dog should occur only when the written word dog is present, not when dig or cat appears. In each case, the response class stays the same, but the learner learns to respond only when certain stimuli are present. That pattern, same response, different stimuli, is the core of stimulus discrimination. In exam questions, stimulus discrimination often hides inside simple stories. Look for the same response described across different situations, people, or cues. The stem might say, "He answers for his teacher, but not for his brother." Or she says dog for the written word dog, but not for other words. Pay attention to phrases like "in the presence of X, but not Y," when his teacher says it, but not when his peers say it, or responds to some stimuli, but not others. These are all classic ways of describing an SD-S-delta relationship, which is exactly what stimulus discrimination is about. If the context is what's changing, not the behavior form, that's your answer. The exam loves to mix these concepts up with nearby terms, so let's organize them on two sides. On the response side, you have response differentiation and response generalization. On the stimulus side, you have stimulus discrimination and stimulus generalization. Response differentiation is narrowing which response forms get reinforced. Response generalization is when multiple different responses all contact reinforcement for the same function. Stimulus discrimination is narrowing which stimuli signal reinforcement. Stimulus generalization is when responding spreads across multiple similar stimuli. A good memory aid: differentiation equals narrowing, fewer options. Generalization equals expanding, more options. Keep those pairings in mind when you read tricky stems. Let's put response differentiation and stimulus discrimination side by side, the way your brain will see them on test day. Response differentiation is about what changes in the response: form, intensity, accuracy, speed. The focus question is, what exactly is the learner doing? Reinforcement is delivered for some response forms, but not others, under the same SD. Stimulus discrimination is about what changes in the stimulus or the context. The focus question is, when or where is the learner responding? Reinforcement is delivered in the presence of some stimuli, but not others, for the same response. So your final exam question becomes, is this vignette really about which response gets reinforced or which stimulus signals reinforcement? Both response differentiation and stimulus discrimination are produced by the same underlying process: differential reinforcement. In both cases, we reinforce some things and withhold reinforcement for others. For response differentiation, the SD stays the same, but we start reinforcing only certain response qualities, like only exactly correct answers or only within 2 seconds. For stimulus discrimination, the response stays the same, but we start reinforcing it only in the presence of certain stimuli, like only when the teacher gives the instruction, not peers. The key insight for the exam is this: differential reinforcement is the method, differentiation and discrimination are the outcomes, depending on whether we've narrowed responses or stimuli. Here's a simple mental flowchart you can run during the exam. Step 1. Read the scenario and ask, what is changing more in this story? Step 2. If what's changing is the response quality, longer, clearer, faster, more complete, think response differentiation. If what's changing is the situation, SD, or person, teacher versus peer, one setting versus another, think stimulus discrimination. Step 3. Check what actually earns reinforcement. If some versions of the response earn reinforcement and others don't, under the same SD, that's response differentiation. If the same response earns reinforcement in some conditions, but not others, that's stimulus discrimination. Keep that flow in your head, and these items become much easier. Let's try a few quick scenarios and you decide: response differentiation, RD, or stimulus discrimination, SD. 1. A child gets a sticker only when speaking in full sentences, not when using single words, RD or SD. 2. A learner answers math questions for the tutor, but not for his brother. Same response, different people, RD or SD. 3. Tokens are given only when the dart hits the target. What's changing more, the response or the stimulus? 4. A student says dog only for pictures of dogs, not cats. Same response, different stimuli. 5. Points are earned only when answering within 2 seconds of the SD. Now we're shaping latency. Label each as RD or SD, and then we'll walk through how the exam expects you to think about them. Now, let's check your answers and, more importantly, the reasoning. Scenario 1 is RD, only full sentences are reinforced, so we're narrowing the response quality. Scenario 2 is SD, same behavior, answering math questions, but reinforcement depends on who gives the instruction, tutor versus brother. Scenario 3 is SD, the same throwing response, but only the stimulus, hitting the target, contacts reinforcement. Scenario 4 is SD again, same response, dog, different picture stimuli control when it's reinforced. Scenario 5 is RD, only responses within 2 seconds are reinforced, which is about latency of the response. Use these as models. Ask, did the reinforcement rule narrow the response or narrow the stimulus conditions? Let's flag some common traps so you can avoid donating points. One trap is mixed changes, scenarios where both the response and the stimulus vary a little. Your job is to decide what the item is really testing, usually the one the explanation talks about more. Another trap is confusing discrimination with generalization. Discrimination is about responding differently to different stimuli. Generalization is about similar responses across similar stimuli. A third trap is missing the reinforcement pattern altogether, forgetting to ask, what is being reinforced exactly? A quick rescue strategy is to underline stimuli, who, where, when, and underline response details, what, how. Then decide which side is being narrowed by reinforcement in the story. By this point, there are a few exam-ready skills you should have. First, you should be able to define response differentiation and stimulus discrimination in your own simple language, not just in textbook terms. Second, you should be able to read a short vignette and sort it quickly into RD or SD based on what is changing and what is being reinforced. Third, you should be able to tell differentiation and discrimination apart from generalization concepts, so you don't fall for lookalike answer choices. And finally, you should be comfortable using a quick decision process, response changing versus stimulus changing, then mapping that to the correct label. Those are the exact skills the exam is probing when it uses this topic. Before you close this video, remember this. Understanding a concept once is not the same as being able to answer 160+ questions under time pressure. The candidates who pass don't just read, they practice with materials that look and feel like the real exam, and they get clear explanations when they're unsure. That's exactly what we built at BCBAmockexam.com, full BCBA mock exams based on the 6th edition task list, flashcards, topic-by-topic lessons, and detailed walkthroughs for tricky areas like measurement, reinforcement, and concepts like the ones you just studied. If this breakdown helped you make sense of response differentiation versus stimulus discrimination, imagine what a complete study plan could do for your confidence. Head over to bcbamockexam.com, keep studying smarter, and I'll see you in the next lesson.